to give a global monopoly to the East India Company. In other words, they get to move, particularly tea, but everything, around the world, and only they get to move it. More importantly, he's going to modify this tax to say they get to bypass the middleman. So instead of coming into Boston Harbor and selling their tea to a warehouse, who in turn would sell it to the British Coffee House, where the tax would kind of trickle around everybody, the East India Company gets to pull right into Boston Harbor and sell it to anybody who they want to. This is known as a modeling efficiency. If I did this today, I would get a prize at the end of the fiscal year from my corporation. This is exactly what Walmart does, or Target. They bypass the middleman, create business efficiencies, and lower their prices. But the king's playing with it a bit. He's allowing the tax to continue, but he sets it up so when the ship comes into port and the tea is sold to any coffee or tea house or individuals, it is taxed as an import. Okay? Now, if it's a coffee house or the old bookstore over there and you drink a cup of tea, you pay a tax for consuming it. So we have an import tax and a consumption tax. After a while, the East India Company says, well, we have too much tea in the colonies, we're going to box it up and ship it to England, where we have a monopoly, or anywhere else in the world we happen to have a monopoly. Then the colony is required to pay an export tax. So it's an import tax, a consumption tax, and an export tax. The only time you're not taxed on tea is when you eliminate it from your bottle. But it's still all added together a trifling tax. I mean, it's almost nothing. It's really about the rest of the stock market moving around the world. The king is just using this as the excuse to shore up the East India Company. But the Americans see right through it. And they say, we have to stop this. And this time, they don't have to argue with each other. They don't have to have James Otis remind them that taxation without representation is tyranny. They're already asking the question, what are the limits of loyalty to a government that will not listen to its people? And they're being held now by the mob because Thomas Jefferson has given them the opportunity to define liberty. What does that mean? What am I going to ask for when I ask for my liberty? I love that word. When is the last time any of you woke up and said, today I'm going to exercise my liberties? This is exactly what Thomas Jefferson was talking about. We don't know what they are, but we get to define them. Beautiful, beautiful idea. So, now everybody's willing to stop the king, and the only way they can stop him is to not allow that tea to enter the colonies. If it gets off those ships, they lose the argument. It's that simple. Even if it's pennies, the king is collecting his tax, he wins the argument. The colonies don't care about the East India Company or the British Empire. They believe they'll be able to win the change. So, they get together in a meeting to discuss this. They actually meet at Faneuil Hall at first. They start discussing what they're going to do as these ships move closer and closer to Boston. The meeting gets so big, you can't fit people in Faneuil Hall anymore. So they come to the largest public meeting structure in the entire town, the old South Meeting House, or I guess they would have called it the South Meeting House back then. It wasn't as old. Much larger, holds more people. This meeting gets so big, they start calling it the body. And the body never disbands. It goes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The reason is they want people available if the ships appear on the horizon. They don't know when they're going to get here. You know? So they want people available. On Sundays, people are still packed in here, but they don't have meetings. The preacher comes in and preaches about the evil of taxes. You know? So they're still having their meeting, but they're giving their due to God in this case. But they keep meeting all the time. When the ships finally arrive, the mob, organized now, goes down to the piers and will not allow them to be unloaded. They put a 24-hour-a-day patrol on the piers. Hundreds of men won't allow these ships to be unloaded, most of them longshoremen. The royal governor tells the Navy, British Navy, tells the admiral, have your men unload the ships. The men say, we're not going to unload those ships. We're British, we're sailors. We will sink it, we'll put cannons on and fight with them, but we're not longshoremen. And the admiral says, okay.
So it's a union argument.
Yeah, kind of. And the governor asks the admiral, he says, well, you're the admiral, order him to do it. He goes, yeah, I'm the admiral here, but when we're out at sea, I'm the only admiral. And there's a whole bunch of them. And he goes, and they're right. By English law, that's not their job. It's not what they do because they're not getting money out of it. So the governor decides on a new tack. He's going to bring the soldiers back over from the island and have them unload the ship. Now they'll do it just to fight them off. Right? They're probably pretty bored. They like a fight. They're just going to do it just to have a fight. The body finds out about this. And they'd have to decide what to do. I'm sure they'd already decided by this point. But the night before the soldiers are to arrive, Samuel Adams is talking in here. And he stands up, hearing his lawyer, he's already standing up, I guess, and he says, gentlemen, there is nothing more we can do to save our country. And it was a code word, because about 80 guys stand up and they take off their greatcoats. And underneath, they're wearing kind of buckskin garb that looks like American Indian garb. And they put on hats with feathers in it, and they paint their face with war paint. And they run out of the building and turn and run down the street. And the rest of the mob in the building follows them. And people all along the street see this and they join in. And they run down to the ships and they lock the captains in the cabin and they pack open the boxes of tea and throw it all into the harbor. Every bit of it is destroyed. Now, in the 1840s, someone cooked up this ludicrous term, the Boston Tea Party. I hate that term because it makes it sound like fun. Right? It's the destruction of the tea. Look at it this way. If I were mad at General Motors Corporation and I wanted to punish them by destroying corporate property, I would have to destroy 150 Cadillac Escalades. This is a car, starting price is $45,000. It goes more like around $80,000. 150 of them. The corporate damage done equals modern dollars about $1.75 million. It is a devastating hit to the East India Company. And it's repeated elsewhere. It happens in New York City. It happens in Charleston, South Carolina. East India Company ships are actually afraid to come into America. The result is devastating to the English economy. Actually, the King's government is going to fail. They have to elect a new prime minister. Now, you guys remember when this thing started, a bunch of guys stood up and they dressed up like American Indians and they ran down there. Do you think they did this so that the British would think Mohawk Indians crossed 300 miles of frontier, bypassing hundreds of tiny villages to attack the third largest town in North America? No. They were sending a message. They weren't even trying to disguise themselves because the British identified most of them. They knew who they were. They weren't trying to disguise themselves. They were sending a message to the king. For this, in 1765, any of the Adamses, Hancock, Washington, Jefferson, even the old Dutch families in New York, Van Rensselaer and Schuyler's, would have said if you had asked them, I'm an Englishman, we're Englishmen. They were proud of being part of the largest empire in the world. But with this event, they were telling the king, we're not Englishmen anymore. We are something different. We are Americans. And what is the best way to symbolize an American than to dress up like a local? And this is why they did it. This is why American U.S. currency, up until just before World War II, at one point or another, has always had some type of American Indian iconography on it, until very recently, because it is a unique symbol for this country. And that's what they were doing. That's the message they were sending. And it was received in London. George III is going to write his new prime minister and say, in reference to the Americans, the die is cast. Either I shall prevail, or the Americans shall be free. What happens after that? We have to go on the next tour that goes to the North End, because that's all I have here. I'm sure most of you guys know the story. But I want to thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions about what I've said, what we talked about, anything else, I'll be here for a little while. If anybody wants to walk with me, I'm going to walk up towards the Granary Burial Ground. I can point out the way to the common. It's right at the end of the granary. Other than that, thank you for your time.
What was Boston's literacy rate?
Very high. I don't know the exact number, but it's very high. The literacy rate in the colonies was actually higher than anywhere else in the world. So they could read, most could write, Could they understand courtly language that guys like John Hancock could write? Unlikely. They could understand fundamental language.
Thank you.